Ahoy there, sailors. Welcome back. Great to have you. We are cooking. Ahab's entered the chat, which means that our voyage finally feels like it's truly underway. The story is going. And how about that description of Ahab in the last chapter? He seems more like a supernatural force than a mortal man. But anyway, I'm excited to get further, so let's waste no more time. Let's read a damn book. Chapter 29. Enter Ahab. To him, Stubb. Stubb, we remember, is our terribly nicotine-addicted second mate. Some days elapsed, and ice and icebergs all astern, the Pequod now went rolling through the bright Quito spring, which at sea almost perpetually reigns on the threshold of the eternal August of the tropic. This is a little odd right off the bat. Quito is the capital of Ecuador, and that's on the Pacific side of South America, and they should still be in the Atlantic at this point. We'll leave that for now, though. On we go. The warmly cool, clear, ringing, perfumed, overflowing, redundant days were as crystal goblets of Persian sherbet, heaped up, flaked up with rose-water snow. The starred and stately nights seemed haughty dames in jeweled velvets, nursing at home in lonely pride the memory of their absent, conquering earls, the golden-helmeted sons. For sleeping man 'twas hard to choose between such winsome days and such seducing nights. But all the witcheries of that unwaning weather did not merely lend new spells and potencies to the outward world. Inward they turned upon the soul, especially when the still mild hours of eve came on. Then memory shot her crystals as the clear ice most forms of noiseless twilights. And all these subtle agencies, more and more, they wrought on Ahab's texture. Old age is always wakeful, as if the longer linked with life, the less man has to do with aught that looks like death. Among sea commanders, the old graybeards will oftenest leave their berths to visit the night-cloaked deck. It was so with Ahab, only that now, of late, he seemed so much to live in the open air, that, truly speaking, his visits were more to the cabin than from the cabin to the planks. It feels like going down into one's tomb, he would mutter to himself, for an old captain like me to be descending this narrow scuttle to go to my grave-dug berth. Is that our first line from Ahab? I think so. Notably, it's written in iambic pentameter. It feels like going down into one's tomb. That's the rhythm that Shakespeare used to write in. Anyway, not to get sidetracked. So almost every 24 hours, when the watches of the night were set, and the band on deck sentineled the slumbers of the band below, and when, if a rope was to be hauled on the forecastle, the sailors flung it not rudely down, as by day, but with some cautiousness dropped it to its place, for fear of disturbing their slumbering shipmates. When this sort of steady quietude would begin to prevail, habitually the silent steersman would watch the cabin scuttle, and ere long the old man would emerge, griping at the iron banister to help his crippled way. And it does say griping at the iron banister with one P, where you would expect it to say gripping. So this seems kind of like some more symbolic wordplay from Melville here. That acknowledgement of his physical limitations is upsetting Ahab. Some considerating touch of humanity was in him, for at times like these he usually abstained from patrolling the quarter-deck, because to his wearied mates, seeking repose within 6 inches of his ivory heel, such would have been the reverberating crack and din of that bony step, that their dreams would have been of the crunching teeth of sharks. But once the mood was on him, too deep for common regardings, and as with heavy lumber-like pace he was measuring the ship from taffrail to mainmast, Stubb, the odd second mate, came up from below, and with a certain unassured, deprecating humorousness hinted that If Captain Ahab was pleased to walk the planks, then no one could say nay. But there might be some way of muffling the noise, hinting something indistinctly and hesitatingly about a globe of tow. Tow? Not sure how to pronounce it, but it's a tight little ball of rope yarn, which Ahab punningly takes to mean the wadding thrust down the muzzle of a cannon. Okay, so he's saying, muffle up your peg leg because it's waking up everyone down below. So, hinting something indistinctly and hesitatingly about a globe of tow and the insertion into it of the ivory heel. Ah, Stub, thou didst not know Ahab then. Am I a cannonball, Stub? Said Ahab, that thou wouldst wad me that fashion? But go thy ways, I had forgot. Below to thy nightly grave, where such as ye sleep between shrouds, to use thee to the filling, one at last. Down, dog, and kennel. Starting at the unforeseen concluding exclamation of the so suddenly scornful old man, Stub was speechless a moment. Then said excitedly, I'm not used to being spoken to that way, sir. I do but less than half like it, sir. Avast, gritted Ahab between his set teeth and violently moving away as if to avoid some passionate temptation. No, sir, not yet, said Stub, emboldened. I will not tamely be called a dog, sir. Then be called 10 times a donkey, a mule, and an ass, and be gone, or I'll clear the world of thee. As he said this, Ahab advanced upon him with such overbearing terrors in his aspect that Stub involuntarily retreated. I was never served so before without giving a hard blow for it, muttered Stub, as he found himself descending into the cabin scuttle. It's very queer. Stop, Stub, somehow. Now, I don't well know whether to go back and strike him or... What's that? Down here on my knees and pray for him. Yes, that was the thought coming up in me, but it would be the first time I ever did pray. It's queer. Very queer. And he's queer, too. Take him fore and aft, he's about the queerest old man Stub ever sailed with. How he flashed at me, his eyes like powder pans. Is he mad? Anyway, there's something on his mind as sure as there's something on a deck when it cracks. He ain't in his bed now either more than 3 hours out of the 24, and he don't sleep then. Didn't that doughboy, the steward, tell me that of a morning he always finds the old man's hammock clothes all rumpled and tumbled, and the sheets down at the foot, and the coverlid almost tied into knots, and the pillow a sort of frightful hot as though a baked brick had been on it. A hot old man. I guess he's got what some folks ashore call a conscience. It's a kind of tick-dolly row, they say. Worse nor a toothache. Well, I don't know what it is, but the Lord keep me from catching it. He's full of riddles. I wonder what he goes into the afterhold for every night. As Doughboy tells me he suspects. What's that for? I should like to know. Who's made appointments with him in the hold? Ain't that queer now? But there's no telling. It's the old game. He goes for a snooze. Damn me, it's worth a fellow's while to be born into the world if only to fall right asleep. Now that I think about it, that's the first thing babies do. And that's a sort of queer too. Damn me, but all things are queer. Come to think of 'em. But that's against my principles. Think not is my 11th commandment, and sleep when you can is my 12th. So here goes again. But how's that? Didn't he call me a dog? Blazes, he called me 10 times a donkey, and piled a lot of jackasses on top of that. He might as well have kicked me, and done with it. Maybe he did kick me, and I didn't observe it. I was so taken all aback with his brow somehow, it flashed like a bleached bone. What the devil's the matter with me? I don't stand right on my legs. Coming afoul of that old man has a sort of turned me wrong side out. By the Lord, I must have been dreaming, though. How? But the only way is to stash it, so here goes to hammock again, and in the morning I'll see how this plaguey juggling thinks over by daylight. And that's the chapter. Just a couple quick things to mention here. Early in the chapter, we have this setting that seems somewhat detached from reality, not just because the geography seems weird, Ishmael calling it a Quito spring when they're still in the Atlantic. So the metaphorical descriptions of the story are taking over for the physically accurate descriptions of the story. And then also, there's kind of a mention of witchcraft and magic, but all the witcheries of that unwaning weather did not merely lend new spells and potencies to the outward world. Inward, they turned upon the soul. And Stubb, in this confrontation with Ahab, seems almost bewitched by him. Ahab doesn't have to resort to physical violence like Peleg does. Remember, Peleg kicks Ishmael in the ass in order to get him to work. But instead, Stubb is involuntarily moved by Ahab's speech alone. Almost like a magic spell. And Stubb's monologue at the end of this chapter kind of lends credence to that read of it, that he was kind of bewitched or placed under a trance by Ahab in that moment, because he's kind of making sense of it and thinking like, why did I act that way? Why did I allow him to call me a donkey and a jackass and a dog? But at any rate, that's about all I have to say about this chapter. If there's anything you would like to add, I would love to read it in the comments. And as always, like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys next episode.